What I adore about Del Rey is that she captures the paradox of attempting to seek liberation through ultimately enslaving obsession. She loves her men as a junkie needs a fix, as a supplicant needs a miracle. And although she looks to them for salvation, she's met with sickness, because she romanticizes destructive forces that fortunately cannot last. Love like lightning, sex like tornadoes, pillow talk like thunder. It takes a certain kind of genius to be that foolhardy. This is a quote from music critic Barry Walters for NPR in 2014 after the release of Lana Del Rey's album Ultraviolence, which was met with widespread criticism with claims of her romanticizing abuse and submission and generally sending an anti-feminist, anti-empowerment message, which is a criticism she has received since first going mainstream in 2012. And while I don't think the act of seeking liberation and salvation for love in itself makes somebody a genius, I certainly think Lana Del Rey has proved and shown herself to be a creative genius in the way that she paints this sonic landscape that really reflects accurately the interior psychological life of somebody with an anxious attachment style. In this video, I'm going to be looking at Lana Del Rey's discography and lyricism to try to help paint the picture of what it's like to have an anxious preoccupied attachment style, what it entails, and also how to heal from it. And this is, of course, not me diagnosing Lana Del Rey with anything. This is just speaking as a Lana fan. Yes, she is back up on the wall. That's how you know it's going to be a good video. Me speaking as a Lana fan with an anxious attachment style myself, because I think people who have this attachment style, which is upwards of 20% of the population, can really relate to the experiences that Lana goes through, even if they haven't gone through the specifics, because of the way she's able to paint that interior life. And because whether or not you're anxiously attached yourself, you definitely have met and dealt with somebody who is, I think looking at her lyricism with the background of psychology will help us to understand why people act in ways that other people deem to be crazy. And so with that, let's get on into the video. What is an anxious attachment style? So to start off this video, we of course need to get clear on what exactly an anxious attachment style is. It can actually be seen as early as in infancy, and it has to do with the way that a baby and child relates to their primary caregivers, the attachment system that they have built with their primary caregiver. And when that attachment system is disrupted in some way, maybe the person, whether consciously or not, doesn't give the same level and consistency of validation and emotional support to the child than is needed. Maybe they're a little bit dysregulated, avoidant, neglectful, etc. This can cause disruptions in the ways our biology basically forms us to our primary caregivers, and this reflects itself later in life with the kinds of relationships that we enter into as adults. An anxious attachment in adults typically presents as a constant preoccupation and rumination over relationships, love, the state of your relationship, etc., an extreme hypersensitivity to the shifts and moods of others, a very strong fear of abandonment. So if your partner is a little less talkative to you one day, you might spiral into feeling that they're going to abandon you, which brings up a bunch of trauma and issues and fears. And anxious people also oftentimes put their partners on a pedestal as a kind of coping mechanism and splitting, I guess you could say, from their own feelings of low self-worth. And they also feel like they have to constantly prove their worth and their lovability to others. They have an external locus of control. They can't self-soothe or validate themselves. They need that from others. And I think it's important to mention that not everybody who has an insecure attachment style grew up in an abusive or dysregulated home. But if you did grow up in an abusive and dysregulated home, you're more than likely going to have an insecure attachment style. And so when it comes to what causes this attachment style for Lana Del Rey, we can extrapolate from some of her lyrics that it has to do with the tumultuous relationship that she has had with her mother. She sings in Wildflower, Wildfire, quote, "You say there's gaps to fill in, so here's the deal. My father never stepped in when his wife would rage at me, so I ended up awkward but sweet. Later than hospitals, stand still on my feet, comfortably numb, but with lithium came poetry." Lana has also spoken before about being sent away to boarding school when she was 14 or 15 to get clean from alcoholism. And when she graduated, she went to live with her extended family. So she was obviously kind of abandoned at a time in which she was in desperate need. She was clearly going through shit with her addiction and everything. And this, I think, really formed the way that Lana lived through her early and late 20s. In Fingertips, she sings to her sister, "Caroline, what kind of mother was she to say I'd end up in institutions? All I wanted to do was kiss Aaron Green and sit by the lake, twisting lime into the drinks that they made, have a babe at 16 in the town I was born in and die. Aaron ended up dead and not me. What the fuck's wrong in your head to send me away, never to come back? Exotic places and people don't take the place of being your child. I give myself 2 seconds to cry. And as for her current relationship, she writes in Black Bathing Suit that, I'm not friends with my mother, but I still love my dad, and alludes to not having seen her mother in a quote, long, long time in A&W. So from this, we can gather that Lana probably has some abandonment trauma from her mother and her dysregulated relationship with her mom. And we'll talk more about these albums towards the end of the video in the healing section, because her most recent work to me is marked by this sort of rambly introspection about her life, hence the really long song title names. Because I think her current work reflects the fact that she's been kind of unpacking and processing a lot of the stuff that happened to her when she was younger, recognizing some of her patterns, and is taking action towards healing from these patterns, which is why I'll talk about it at the end. But for the bulk of this video, I'm going to be going through the bulk of her discography, which is when she is stuck in this anxious, preoccupied state, and is kind of not really fully in control of her actions or feelings or emotions, because that's where most people who are stuck in this anxious cycle live in. And so to explore what that's like through Lana Del Rey's lyrics, I'm going to get into this section on fear of abandonment, activating strategies, and the anxious avoidant trap. The first theme of the anxious attachment cycle that I want to discuss in Lana's lyricism is changing her identity to become whoever her love object wants her to be. Anxious attachers sometimes disassociate from or suppress themselves and feel like they have to work to earn love from others, seeking external rather than internal validation. This is because their core beliefs are so negative that they don't feel capable of dealing with them and require preoccupation as a distraction. We see this beginning aspect of the anxious attachment style play out in Lana Del Rey's lyrics multiple times, but to start off with, we'll look at the monologue from the iconic music video for Ride. She states in the opening monologue, "There's no use in talking to people who have a home. They have no idea what it's like to seek safety in other people, for home to be wherever you lie your head. I was always an unusual girl. My mother told me that I had a chameleon soul, no moral compass pointing due north, no fixed personality. Just an inner indecisiveness that was as wide and wavering as the ocean. Because I was born to be the other woman, who belonged to no one, who belonged to everyone, who had nothing, who wanted everything." Because she enmeshes herself in the identity of the men that she sees, as we'll explore later, she doesn't feel like she has an inner core or sense of self or identity. She doesn't know who she is because she is so focused on gaining the approval of others. And when she says, "I have nothing but want everything," everything is the full attention of just one man, but what she gets is the peripheral attention of these anxious or avoidant, unavailable men. We see this play out further in Florida Kilos, where she says, "White lines, pretty baby tattoos, don't know what they mean, they're special just for you." Meaning she is symbolically being literally branded by a man in terms of tattoos, the ones that he wants her to have, becoming his property, and that makes her happy because all she wants is to be cared for by one singular person and to belong to that person. She then sings, "Prison don't mean nothing to me if you'll be by my side," again not minding a state of even negative permanence if it means her man will continue loving her. And then in Black Beauty, she sings, "I dye my hair a darker shade of brown because you like your woman Spanish, dark, strong, and proud." And in Terrence Loves You, "I lost myself when I lost you." And because the root of her psychology is trying to win the love and approval that she didn't receive from her mother, no external thing can actually fulfill that void within her. Even all the hallmarks of American success mean nothing if she doesn't have the affection and love from her love object, which she is projecting that childhood need onto. And we see this in Without You, where she sings, "Everything I want, I have. Money, notoriety, and Rivieras. I even think I found God in the flashbulbs of the pretty cameras. Then, hello, hello, can you hear me? I could be your China doll if you'd like to see me fall. Tell me life is beautiful, they all think I have it all. I have nothing without you. All my dreams and all the lights mean nothing without you." We see this preoccupation with love further in the next best American record, quote, "It's you, all the roads lead to you, everything I want and do, all the things that I say. It's true, all the roads lead to you." And of course, video games. "It's you, it's all for you, everything I do. They say that the world was built for two, only worth living if somebody is loving you, and baby, now you do." And this preoccupation with relationships to the point of literally saying, "I will break myself if you want me to, if that makes you love me, because you're all that I want," is only worsened when it comes to the types of partners that anxiously preoccupied people seek out, which are their insecure opposites, dismissive avoidance. Because avoidants suppress and disassociate from their emotions to the point where they appear unaffected by them, They appear from the outside to be emotionally stable and therefore able to supply the extra support that the anxious partner needs. Avoidants also value their independence over everything, and because anxious people tend to lack independence, they really admire and seek out this quality in that partner. And because they do have this kind of fully formed identity, whereas the anxious partner doesn't, they then have an ability to morph into who that person wants them to be in order to win the approval and love of that secure partner. The reason this relationship dynamic is called the anxious avoidant trap, however, is because avoidant people are not secure. They are deeply afraid of emotional intimacy and they both suppress and disassociate from their own emotions. But then, when the anxious partner gets more clingy and attached and more needy, that makes the avoidant person pull away, which in turn makes the anxious person even more needy and crazy because they are having their fear of abandonment triggered. And that again just causes this push pull dynamic with the anxious and the avoidant. And the anxious falls into constant preoccupation, as well as engaging in activating strategies, which are basically any thought or action with the purpose of bridging that gap of the avoidant person pulling away. And even worse, this constant emotional roller coaster with the avoidant partner becomes addicting to the anxious partner because they associate all these heightened passionate feelings with love. Because anytime the avoidant gives them a little bit of affection, it's like everything is going off in their brain, like I'm finally receiving the love on a subconscious level that I never received, and now my life is complete. But then just as quickly, something will shift, and the anxious person is spiraling into absolute hell and despair because they are again triggered and feeling that they are going to be abandoned and that their core beliefs of being unlovable and unworthy will be proven true. And we see several examples of this sort of attachment system going off in many of Lana's lyrics. But a great example of the activated attachment system is Diet Mountain Dew, where she sings, "You're no good for me, but baby, I want you. Maybe I like this roller coaster, maybe it keeps me high. Maybe the speed, it brings me closer, I could sparkle up your eye." And from Cherry, I said, "Real love is feeling no fear when you're standing in the face of danger. Because you just want it so much. A touch from your real love is like heaven taking the place of something evil and letting it burn off from the rush." And as for dating avoidant men, we hear in Pretty When You Cry, "All those little times you said that I'm your girl, you make me feel like your whole world. I'll wait for you, babe. That's all I do, babe. Don't come through, babe. You never do. Don't say you need me when you leave and you leave again. I'm stronger than all my men except for you. Don't say you need me if you know that you're leaving. I can't do it, but you do it well." And then, of course, she sings about being the other woman, which of course implies dating emotionally unavailable men. And she also talks about dating men who are caught up in drugs and criminality, etc., who clearly cannot provide the actual level of support that Lana is seeking. To quote Blue Jeans, "You went out every night, and baby, that's all right. I told you that no matter what you did, I'd be by your side. 'Cause I'm a ride or die, whether you fail or fly. Well, shit, at least you tried. But when you walked out that door, a piece of me died. Told you I wanted more, that's not what I had in mind. I just wanted it like before, we were dancing all night. Then they took you away, stole you out of my life, you just need to remember. I will love you till the end of time, I would wait a million years. Promise you'll remember that you're mine, baby can you see through the tears. Love you more than those bitches before, I will love you till the end of time." And so, alongside this preoccupation and great emotional intensity that the anxious person projects onto unavailable partners who can't actually fulfill that need for them, we also see the fear of abandonment get triggered whenever the partner is distant, because it brings you back to that childhood state of being helpless and defenseless, unable to help yourself or love yourself while you're being abandoned by your caregiver. We see this in Off to the Races, where she sings, "I'm not afraid to say that I'd die without him. Who else is going to put up with me this way? I need you, I breathe you, I'd never leave you. They would rue the day I was alone without you." And when abandonment trauma is triggered, it causes the anxious partner to engage in protest behaviors, which is kind of a last ditch effort to reconnect with the partner. It's an activating strategy at its most extreme. And to use an example of this that we see in anxiously attached people, some of them, not all, is threatening to kill yourself if your partner leaves you, which Lana alludes to in one of her unreleased songs called Pink Champagne, where she sings, "I don't really want to die, I just want the pain to be over. I know that I talked about it all the time, babe, I just wanted you to come over." But as we all know, there's nothing you can do to truly force someone to stay with you. You can't actually prevent somebody from leaving. And a lot of people think anxious preoccupieds can't be single or alone, but they actually can, so long as they continue engaging in preoccupation and rumination. And that often takes the form of limerence and healing fantasies, which brings us into our next section on that exact topic. And to quote from a blog called Joy Ninja, because she honestly describes things so well, limerence is a projection of a fantasy relationship onto someone, often a person who is unavailable in one way or another. It is often wrapped up in a healing fantasy, where romantic love brings you all the needs that went unmet in childhood and heals your deepest pain. You imagine finally feeling understood, seen, loved, and safe just by finding the right person, not by doing years of difficult and vulnerable healing work. Limerence is accompanied by feelings of intense longing, idealization, and is often thought of as, quote, unrequited love. But this is not a wistful romantic idea, it's a trauma symptom. It forms from a childhood where you experienced emotional neglect to the point where you invented the kind of relationship you needed in your mind and now project it onto people who may, in reality, be completely uninterested, unavailable, inappropriate, or at times even dangerous to you. Limerence is essentially a crush on steroids. It's a person addiction. You are literally ruminating and having these thoughts and daydreams, maladaptive daydreams about your love object as a form of addiction to distract you from the inner pain that you're feeling. And going back to the music video for a Ride, the monologue opens up with the lines, "I was in the winter of my life, and the men I met along the road were my only summer. At night I fell asleep with visions of myself dancing and laughing and crying with them. 3 years down the line of being on an endless world tour, and my memories of them were the only things that sustained me, and my only real happy times." And in an unreleased song, she sings, "Been gone for 3 years, is that enough for you, boy? And then I wish I was your girl," over and over again. So for 3 years, she is literally coping and living by reliving fantasies and memories with these men who she used to love or who she felt used to love her. And that's the only way she knows how to basically continue on life. She's so addicted to limerent fantasies that she can't experience joy in any other way. And limerence as a metaphor for addiction, I think also really comes through in a line from Pretty When You Cry. Going back to that song, she sings, "All those special times I spent with you, my love, they don't mean shit compared to all your drugs. But I don't really mind. I've got much more than that. Like my memories. I don't need that." So while her partner is unavailable to her because he prefers drugs over her love, she is kind of the opposite. She has those memories and that fantasy of him loving her, and that sustains her rather than alcoholism or any other drug. But in the case of Lana's discography, I actually view limerence as just kind of an offshoot symptom of the bigger issue that she faces, which is engaging in rescue or healing fantasies. I'm going to quote again that Joy Ninja blog because she honestly killed it with this one, but she states, "These are also sometimes called redemption fantasies or salvation fantasies or rescue fantasies. They are all versions of the same idea. It's also closely related to the feeling of limerence, which is that crush feeling where you are having more of a relationship with an obsessive story in your head about a person than the actual person. They are all ways to meet our needs with fantasy at the expense of reality." By definition, wounds and trauma happen because we are overwhelmed. It is the experience of overwhelm that is actually what gets stuck in our memory and in our nervous system. These wounded parts of us are always going to have a belief that I can't handle this by myself. That sets up the wounded part to be constantly looking for that rescue in external sources. There's also an element of taking on the helpless victim or needy child role in relationships, while the partner takes on the stable adult daddy kind of role in the relationship. And this childlike element is alluded to in Lucky Ones, where she sings, "I got so scared, I thought no one could save me. You came along, scooped me up like a baby." And to return back to that blog post, you may also have a lot of resistance to giving up the fantasy, and that's understandable too. If the only way you can imagine being healed is through this fantasy, the idea of giving it up can feel like being told that you will never be healed. This was my relationship with books about codependency for a long time. Don't try to talk me out of the only thing I'm currently living for. A fantasy lets us preserve hope when we are consumed with hopelessness. It lets us imagine something so perfect, so good, so pure, that it can save us, even in our state of self-loathing. It lets us maintain a belief in our healing when we can't see any realistic path to get there yet. It lets us isolate our deepest desires in a safe place that is separate from the daily hellscape of our mind's toxic shame. And this crushing fear that comes with the fantasy crumbling, leaving you with your abandonment and attachment issues, is explored in Lana Del Rey's High by the Beach, where she sings, "Loving you is hard, being here is harder. You take the wheel. I don't want to do this anymore. It's so surreal. I can't survive if this is all that's real. Anyone can start again, not through love, but through revenge. Through the fire, we're born again. Peace by vengeance springs the end." And of course, in these lyrics, Lana is trying to regain control over the helplessness that she feels by instead of being preoccupied with love and relationship fantasies, she shifts to revenge and vengeance, which is just another way of trying to gain control over this fantasy situation because you can't actually live in reality. But to see the positive flip side of losing the limerent fantasy rescuing energy, we see it again in her ride opening monologue where she's quoting from Fight Club saying, I knew that it takes getting everything you ever wanted and then losing it to know what true freedom is. And to give an alternate look at rescue fantasies outside of love, a lot of people's rescue fantasy is if they become famous, people will love them, they'll feel happy. If I become rich, people will love me and I'll feel happy. If I can accomplish XYZ goal, win the beauty pageant, etc., subconsciously, my daddy, my mommy will finally love me. But the problem is when people achieve and attain those goals, they actually don't feel any better. Now they actually feel worse because they're back to that crushing, crippling, childlike state, and now they don't know what to do about it because the thing that they spent their whole life trying to achieve actually turned out to be nothing. This is why so many successful people are still so miserable and sad and broken on the inside. The main way this rescue or salvation fantasy is represented in Lana's work, however, is through religious imagery. She relies a lot on religious imagery, and we can see how these love salvation fantasies get mixed together very clearly in her song Religion, where she sings, You're my religion, you're how I'm living, when all my friends say I should take some space. Well, I can't even envision that for a minute. When I'm down on my knees, you're how I pray. Hallelujah, I need your love. And in an interview for her album Ultraviolence, Lana opened up a little bit about her experience being drawn into a cult, saying, I used to be a member of an underground sect, which was ran by a guru. He surrounded himself with young girls, and he had this insane charisma I couldn't resist as well. So I was in this, I'll call it sect, because I was longing for love and security. But then I found out that this guru wasn't a good, but a bad person. He thought that he had to break people first before he could build them up again. At the end, I left the sect. And unfortunately, cults prey on people from dysfunctional and broken homes who are seeking that love and validation from some kind of leader. They love bomb you into joining, and then they become super controlling and sometimes abusive. And so, to talk a little bit more about the extremes of where this anxious attachment style can get you, I want to talk about being dependent on an abusive relationship, whether it's a love partner or a cult leader, which Lana speaks about heavily in her song Ultraviolence, which is why it was so criticized because it's too, controversial or whatever. But it's actually really accurate, in my opinion, when it comes to the emotional experience of being in an abusive dynamic, when you genuinely love the person because they are your savior, they're who you want to feel salvation from. She sings, I was filled with poison, but blessed with beauty and rage. Jim told me that. He hit me, and it felt like a kiss. Jim brought me back, reminded me of when we were kids. I can hear sirens, sirens. He hit me and it felt like a kiss. I can hear violins, violins. Give me all of that ultraviolence. So the storytelling in these lyrics is pretty straightforward, but basically any attention from the love object is good attention, and what more attention are you getting than getting punched in the face? That is full focus and control on you, sweetheart. And the beauty and rage dichotomy actually makes me think of the fawn response when it comes to the 4 Fs, which is fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, in terms of coming up to some kind of discomfort that brings you back to your childhood trauma or an actual present danger. And so the fawn response plays out through people pleasing, learned helplessness, playing up your cutesy side, your baby side, to try and get someone to lay off, to try to get the threat to dissipate, because you're showing, I am not a threat to you. I'm like totally vulnerable, like a dog rolling over and showing you his stomach. And then rage, on the other hand, I think in this context is used to get the other person's attention when you feel like they're abandoning you or mistreating you or not giving you the attention that you need. And if Lana had an avoidant parental figure growing up, she probably, this is obviously speculation, she probably lashed out in kind of more grand and extreme ways in order to get the attention of that parent, acting out because she couldn't get the validation or emotional support she needed otherwise. And so she associates even getting yelled at, punished, disciplined, etc., as love because finally the parental authority is paying attention to me. And then the double meaning of hearing sirens being both a police car as well as the beautiful sound luring you into the sea, and violence being also violins, the beautiful orchestral musical instrument. It just shows how muddled these concepts of violence and love have become for Lana. She later sings, I could have died right there because he was right beside me. Jim raised me up. He hurt me, but it felt like true love. Jim taught me that loving him was never enough. And these lyrics simultaneously imply dying of happiness because Jim is beside her, as well as, physically being under the threat of being killed, because any man could kill any woman with his bare hands pretty much, but especially if you're a psychopathic cult leader. And then Jim teaching her that loving him is never enough, I think just really highlights that striving quality. If I do this, if I do that, you will love me. Just the endless pursuit of love, which is never actually enough. And then the religious imagery of the song continues with, "Heaven is on earth, I will do anything for you, babe. Blessed is this union." And then she finishes with, "I love you the first time, I love you the last time, 'cause I'm your jazz singer and you're my cult leader. I love you forever, I love you forever." And again, this highlights to me the very sad but extremely common scenario of someone with childhood attachment figures latching onto an abusive person and becoming addicted to that cycle of abuse because they constantly want the sweet version of the person back, and they take the abuse as being their fault, like, "Oh, I'll just change myself to be better the next time." And that's just kind of how the cycle goes. And when it comes to abuse as a theme in Lana's discography as well, there's nothing she references more than Lolita, but it honestly deserves its own video to really get into like the psychology, the references, the aesthetics, that the fashion trends that kind of came as a result of Lana's influence. If you are interested in a video like that, I know a lot of people kind of talk about Lolita on the internet. I feel like I can kind of add my own perspective because it is really a nuanced issue and topic. If that's interesting to you, please comment down below because I'll make it. And then subscribe so you don't miss it. But now that we've gone through all of this kind of dark and heavy shit, the darker aspects of this attachment style and Lana's discography and lyrics, let's instead move into how to heal from the anxious attachment style if you have one, because it is actually possible to go from anxious or avoidant to secure. Beginning with breaking the salvation fantasy, we see Lana come to terms with how false this fantasy is and make the choice to take control of her own life for once, in the song Get Free, where she sings, "Sometimes it feels like I've got a war in my mind. I want to get off, but I keep riding the ride. I never really noticed that I had to decide to play someone's game or to live my own life. And now I do. I want to move out of the black into the blue. Finally, gone is the burden of the Crowley way of being that comes from energies combined. Like my part was, I was not discerning, and you, as we found out, were not in your right mind. There's no more chasing rainbows and hoping for an end to them. Their arches are illusions, solid at first glance, but then you try to touch them, there's nothing to hold on to, the colors used to lure you in and put you in a trance." And I particularly love the lyric here about having to either play your own game or live someone else's life, because when you are stuck in that helpless, needy, childlike role when seeking out relationships, you are looking for someone else to give you your identity. You are liable to be abused and manipulated by all kinds of people who want you for their own narrative because you're just looking to latch on to anything. You're not living your own life. You're literally being molded and shaped by others who maybe are nefarious. And one way to help break out of this cycle, if you are someone who experiences limerence and healing fantasies and the like, is to recognize what needs and qualities you're projecting onto the other person, because those are the needs that you have within yourself. And there's usually a way to fulfill those needs within yourself through self-care and self-love and all of that, which I know sounds cheesy, but we'll get into it in a little bit. And notice the good parts too. Maybe when you see yourself through this other person's lens, they see a positive, beautiful, charismatic, wonderful person of you, and that's kind of what you're addicted to. Well, guess what? You could be that person. It's not the other person's gaze that you're, projecting onto them that is like you in a positive light. You can actually view yourself in a positive light too. But when it comes to getting rid of your healing and rescue fantasies, it's important not to be too hard on yourself. To quote again that Joy Ninja blog, Emma writes, "I suggest you honor the fantasy as something that has helped you. Sometimes fantasy is the only thing that gets us through a lonely or terrifying childhood. And it isn't all just coping. Fantasies can also motivate us to seek healing and growth. A lot of the personal growth work in my life was at least partly motivated by trying to make myself into someone acceptable to a romantic partner, because in my healing fantasy, that was the only context where a deeper healing could occur. And this makes sense, because a lot of my deeper wounding is related to attachment. So it makes sense that my healing fantasy would revolve around a deep attachment. Your fantasies will likely revolve around your deepest wounds and neglected needs." And we see Lana begin to take her identity formation into her own hands and to become more of her authentic self in her song Beautiful, where she sings, "Don't turn me into something I'm not. There's no way to sustain it. I try not to hold back. It seems either way it makes you mad. So I'll be who I'll be. If you think that that's cool, then I'll take you back." We see here Lana beginning to take identity formation into her own hands, as well as establishing boundaries. If a partner tries to change her, she won't get back together with him. She has to be allowed to be herself in a relationship, which is like so true. So true, queen. Like, But it's really hard when you're anxiously attached because you have no boundaries. You're so afraid of abandonment that you will literally do anything to keep your partner around. So this is a great initial step for Lana. I don't know why I feel so weird talking about her as if I know her. This is literally based on her discography and speculation. I know nothing about her life. But this ability to be yourself is actually the pathway to having true intimacy in relationships, because anxious people don't admit it, but deep down they are actually also afraid of intimacy, which is why they get in these crazy heightened cycles and actually push their partners away, fulfilling their core belief of believing to be worthy of being abandoned. They literally kind of force their partners to abandon them unless the partner is like really abusive or like a total doormat, in which case you become the abusive one. You have to be able to show up as your adult self with full responsibility for your actions in order to have a truly intimate relationship. Like, you have to be able to be your authentic self. You can't take on the needy child role in the relationship. That's not equal and it doesn't work. She continues in the song, "What if someone had asked Picasso not to be sad? Never known who he was or the man he'd become, there would be no blue period. Let me run with the wolves, let me do what I'll do. Let me show you how sadness can turn into happiness. I can turn blue into something beautiful, beautiful like you." And here we see Lana moving away from her past. She's able to refer to it as a blue period, like Picasso's work, recognizing that it was a part of her psychological and artistic journey, and not necessarily regretting that period. But I think she's happy to be moving out of it, you know, and I'm happy for her. And she's proud of her art even if other people don't like it or criticize it, which is really, really key and important when it comes to being a genuine and authentic person. And then she sings in Living Legend, "I never meant to be bad or unwell. I was just living on the edge, right between heaven and hell, and I'm tired of it." And we see her beginning to transition out of living on the edge to a more kind of stable life in Chemtrails Under the Country Club, where she sings, "Meet you for coffee at the elementary schools. We laugh about nothing as the summer gets cool. It's beautiful how the steep normality settles down over me. I'm not bored or unhappy. I'm still so strange and wild. You're in the wind, I'm in the water. Nobody's son, nobody's daughter. Watching the chemtrails over the country club. Suburbia, the Brentwood market. What to do next? Maybe we'll love it. White picket chemtrails over the country club." So now we see her entering this life of stability and relative normalcy. Her and her lover are not anyone's daughter or son, meaning they are no longer defined in relation to their parental authority relationships, no longer playing out those childhood patterns of avoidance and anxiousness or abuse and submission, etc. She's able to finally find a real, stable, normal love with a white picket fence and everything, at least in terms of the song. This could be a fantasy as well. I mean, she's a songwriter, but that is kind of what the lyrics imply to me. But when it comes to healing from an anxious attachment style or any kind of mental ailment, really, and entering a state of more normalcy, I do think the first step is literally to be completely honest with yourself. Because if you're engaging in limerence or a imbalanced relationship, etc., you are probably avoiding things about your life that you don't want to look at. I have literally in my life been like unemployed, room a mess, drinking every day, life falling apart, serious issues, being evicted, etc. And literally in my head, I'm like, but if the person I love loves me back, like my life will be perfect. Like, bitch, what? There's clearly things you're like not wanting to look at in your life, and that's why you're projecting onto this fantasy. Girl, just get your shit together. Like, there's so much to do. Like, you don't have time to just sit around daydreaming. Like, hello, like Jordan Peterson says, clean your room, clean your fucking room. But psychologically, cleaning your room looks like literally being completely honest about the situation that you're in, being completely non-judgmental of the thoughts and feelings that you have come up inside of you. By being able to notice your thoughts without attaching emotionally to them, you can ask yourself whether or not those beliefs serve you. It's also important to replace negative thoughts with neutral or positive ones. If you make a mistake and think, "I'm a failure" or "I can't do anything right," you can shift those thoughts to, "I made a mistake because I'm human and I can learn from this and do better in the future." You have to break the cycle of immediately giving in to the inner critic. And a lot of your inner critic literally develops as a defense mechanism. For instance, and this doesn't have to be family. Again, you don't have to have been in a dysfunctional or abusive family to have these kind of issues and to have attachment issues. A big experience for a lot of us going to school, you have to fucking learn how to be normal and how to like fit in with the other kids, which is so annoying. And the inner critic kind of arises to kind of beat you into submission so you don't stand out too much because kids are bullying and cruel. Like, there's defense mechanisms that you've built through this inner critic to keep you safe. But as an adult, you're hopefully no longer in those environments that are dangerous. You're allowed to be safe now. You can thank your inner critic for helping you, for saving you, but wish it goodbye. because now it's getting in the way of you authentically shining. Like, it's getting in the way of you living your life. And you have things to do. Again, you don't have time. Also, of course, getting older helps so much, so underrated. I've journaled pretty much every day for probably 8 years at this point, and now I've lived enough life to where I see the same relationships happening in my life, friendships and romantic. They all explode and end in the same ways. I'm always in the same patterns with them. And thankfully, when you get old enough, you've been through the same pattern over and over again that you're able to reflect and find key insights as to why you're the common denominator. What are you doing that is causing this situation over and over again in your life? And that allows you to find out what you need to change to not have those same circumstances. You have to learn how to comfort and get along with your inner child. You literally have to learn how to be friends with yourself, even if you fucking hate yourself and literally want to kill yourself. It's like you're actually stuck with you until the end. So you have to get along, and you have to be comforting and nurturing to yourself. You literally have to love yourself. Like, that's what loving yourself is. And you have to learn how to be in the present moment and to be able to experience your negative and uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. Ask yourself, is this a discomfort or is it a catastrophe? Because it's usually just a discomfort. And usually your anxiety and your fear makes it so much worse than it is. The initial thing happens, but if you spiral out of control to this like crazy suicidal mess and you're like threatening people and like being how you can get, you don't have to actually get to that level. You can notice a discomfort, even if it's a really big pain, and just sit with the emotions, cope with it, deal with it, move through it, and you don't have to actually spiral. But because that process is so automatic, it's really hard to disrupt. But over time, you will get better at it. I feel like I've gotten so much better. Y'all didn't see me at my craziest, but I have gotten so much more stable in the past few years. And then one of the most challenging aspects of getting through the anxious attachment style, people get so uncomfortable with this, they don't like to hear it, but it's literally getting out of the victim mindset. And for me, this has been my main issue that I've worked through in therapy. I've known forever that I have a victimhood mindset. And that's why I'm so against like woke culture, cancel culture, all this stuff in our society that says you need to be offended by everything and be a victim and wield your victimhood and be a crybaby. The reason that I'm so against that stuff is because I know what it's like to have that victimhood mindset, and it's completely self-destructive or outwardly destructive to the rest of society. Like, I know what it's like to live that way. And so that's why I'm like, no, this is bad. You have to be able to let the past go. You cannot wallow in your circumstances. The past is over. It's over. Like, you only have control over the present moment. Like, change your life. And so for some tough love, I do want to read this other article I found on the anxious attachment style as it relates to the victimhood mindset. He states, "Truth is, many people don't know who they are without their pain. They might express a desire to heal, but their beliefs and behaviors tell quite a different story. They're stuck in a loop of complaining, venting, and seeking perspective from others. They're so identified with their own suffering and addicted to their own stress responses that they can't fathom what it would be like to have a calm and peaceful existence or relationship. They've been dysregulated for so long that they're scared of letting go of their suffering because they don't know who they are without it. They're blinded to the role they play in perpetuating their own pain. Here's a harsh truth. In order to progress on your healing journey, you must be willing to let go of your victimhood. You must realize that your experiences are not who you are. You must unbecome who you thought you were in order to become who you really were all along. You must be willing to unlearn your unhealthy coping strategies and learn healthier ones instead. You must do what I did above, put your foot down and say enough is enough. It will take hard work, but trust me when I say that this is the ingredient many people are missing. They simply aren't tired of their own behavior and cycles. They aren't finished living out their pain. They're addicted to their own stress. Begin by acknowledging that something needs to change. Then go from there. I've seen that energy help countless anxious attachers across the globe ditch their old ways. And I know this video was probably a lot, but I feel like that's a good note to end it on. If you want to see more videos like the Lolita video about Lana Del Rey, etc., please subscribe. And also, if you made it to this part of the video, number one, thank you so much. What? Like, thank you. Number two, comment your favorite Lana Del Rey song and album down below. I really want to hear. Not to be basic, but mine is Ultraviolence, and my favorite album is Ultraviolence. And then in terms of unreleased songs, Pink Champagne and I Talk to Jesus, those are my favorites. But let me know your favorites down below. Don't forget to like the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Please take care of yourselves. Please take care of yourselves and be kind to yourself. Bye.